I'm just checking my notes, because I need to. I'm all out of order, you see. So Randy is actually with Commvault. So you all know Commvault as well. I mean, they have a stand out there. You can go and visit them as well. Next is Glenn, right?
No.
No, I'm one early. Okay. Fred Simon. I'm sorry, my apologies. Co-founder and chief architect of JFrog, the Artifactory Binary Repository, and them afterwards as well. Next along the line, now we have Glenn. Glenn is in fact the CTO responsible for technology across both G2, G3 and G2, G3 Digital. And again, a vast storied career and definitely a top bloke because he's another Aussie. You can probably tell by my accent that I'm not quite from around here. I'm from Colorado. And on the far side, we have another one of the great luminaries of the DevOps community, J. Paul Reed, currently an independent consultant. Come and talk to him about how he can help you with all of your stuff. Gave a great session yesterday on blameless postmortems. Some very interesting stuff. So I'm going to quickly let everyone sort of introduce themselves. So starting us off with you first, give us just a little bit more interest about your background, what your interest in DevOps is.
Yeah, so my name is Asaf, and like I said, I'm a co-founder VP product of Logs.io. We work a lot with DevOps engineering all over the world, and I find it fascinating, kind of the transformation that development and operation are going through right now. Fantastic,
thank you. James, tell us, I know you well, but tell the world about you.
So my name is James Zurkert. Where Andy knows me mostly from is I spent a long time blogging about cloud computing, wrote for both CNET and for GigaOM over the years, kind of independent right now, but from that perspective, I work with SOSTA, which is the leading company in performance testing and analytics for digital, and my focus is on beginning to look at ways we can correlate the performance data that we gather against other business data factors, and I have a session at 3:40 where I'll talk through a little bit about what the thinking is there.
Excellent. Randy, hi. You in Commvault.
Yes, Commvault, I guess the other fun part is I've been in Commvault for 21 years, so the chief technologist for our Windows products, run our Microsoft partnership all up. Commvault provides a data management software solution set with a lot of integration around content search and e-discovery, which is a fascinating time today with the cloud as a number of analytics engines become more and more popular, and these analytics engines are really looking for content, which puts Commvault in a very unique, people move and migrate to the cloud.
Brilliant, thank you. Fred, tell us a little bit about yourself and about JFrog.
So yeah, I'm Fred Simon, one of the co-founders of JFrog. We founded the company in 2008, and mainly on the DevOps and the DevOps community. We are basically helping every developer transmit the code that they are doing all the way to production. We are trying to help all of them move this code to production, and we eat our own dog food, or like we said in France, we drink our own champagne. So I'm really, really amazed by what we are capable of doing even for ourselves, and what our customers and users are capable of doing in terms of distributing software multiple times a day, all the way to the customers. That's a really nice revolution we are in.
Good one. So Glenn, tell us a little bit about yourself and G2, G3.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. So yeah, Aussie. I live in Scotland. I celebrated working for 36 years last month. I've worked for 3 companies. The Australian Navy for 16 years, HP for 20, and now 6 months as the CTO for G2, G3. I see this as an exciting period for technologists who want to invent and innovate. You know, if we bring together automation, microservices, containers, and analytics, we bring those together, we can harness and do basically anything, you know, we can sort of dream of. I have a true passion about staff. I actually, you know, I focus a lot of my attention on the people side. So if I look at the, you know, the human science of why would people want to do things as compared to command and control, that you have to do things. So I spend a lot of time on that.
Good one. And last but definitely not least, Paul, tell us a little bit about what you're doing with DevOps today.
Thanks, Andy. It's great to be here. My background is actually in release engineering, and so I kind of got caught up into DevOps from the standpoint of I went as an independent consultant, and a lot of DevOps problems turn out to be release engineering problems, so I kind of lucked into that. And so I've worked with companies of all sizes, and from Fortune 50s to startups here in the Bay Area. And tons of different markets, and it's kind of interesting to see what problems are different between those and which problems are the same as they try to figure out what DevOps means in their space. By the way, if you can't tell by my accent, I'm also from Colorado.
Excellent. So I'm going to get into a whole bunch of questions, but I want to make sure that everyone gets a chance to field their questions to our panelists. So I'm going to ask for questions from the floor a little bit later on. If you're watching online, or if you're just a little bit shy, feel free to tweet at me, hashtag DevOpsSummit. I'm monitoring that right here on my phone, and I'll start to ask some of the panelists questions off the internets. If you're watching this on videotape, then tweet with DevOps Summit anyway, and I'm sure the panelists here will be monitoring this for a while, and they'll get back to you directly. So, firstly, I'm going to start. I'll stay with you for the moment, Paul. Is the foundation of DevOps done? We're talking today about the future of DevOps, about, are we done? Is there more to do? Where are we going with this thing called DevOps? And, Paul, are we done? Is DevOps fully defined and done?
Oh, far from it. What's the quote about the features here, but just unevenly distributed? Yeah, so I think that's kind of where we are. A lot of the people that I speak with, thinkers in the DevOps space, say that DevOps is emergent, and therefore, because it is emergent, I don't think you ever will have a entirely defined, foundation. And now there's going to be, I think, both technology, some cultural aspects, processes that we sort of agree on are good practices, that you can't do some of the things that DevOps often promises, or the promise of DevOps, you can't get that without those having some semblance of that in your organization, taking it and applying it in your organization. But I am firmly believe that it is emergent, and therefore you're never really done with an emergent thing.
Yeah, no, good one. Glenn, so there's a lot to do still, obviously, and I think that's very true. It's a little bit of a Dorothy Dixer set up there. There is a lot to do, but where are we already mature? What's actually, Paul mentioned best practice, for want of a better word. What is a best practice now, Glenn? Where are we up to right now? What's good?
I think individually in the departments, people have actually done a good thing. And it depends on what functional area you're in. It could be from a business service, technical. There's a lot of best in class. And I know that people spend a lot of time working how to get to best in class. So if you look at from a technology perspective, people in their own view of the world, they think they're doing a fantastic job. And they spend a lot of time, a lot of training, and again, their view of the world, they think they're fantastic. But then when they start thinking about the broader context of business operations, they realise it's not joined up. So this is the whole reason that we're here, is how do we actually look at the culture, management of change, systems thinking, so on and so forth. So taking up what Paul was saying there as well, is that it's not done, but it requires strong and relentless leadership.
Where's that leadership? I mean, maybe Fred, you can give me a little bit of your ideas. Where's that leadership going to come from? We've seen DevOps been starting from a ground-up movement, so lots of individual practitioners taking it on themselves to make a difference to their world. As Glenn says, we're looking to now start to look at leadership, and where's that going to come from?
Well, from what I see is usually it comes from the big web company, the Twitter and the Yahoo, and the Stash from Yahoo. He has a great sentence about defining DevOps. He said, "From commit to production without human intervention." And so the goal is really to take what the brain of a developer and what he wants to do with his code and bring it to the customer and bring it there without having 37 manual steps. And so those, a company like Yahoo had a lot of history, and they were not DevOps when he started. And they are showing the way, and they are willing to take risk and show how it goes. And of course, all the Twitter of the world and things like that, they can also show how it is. And it's a change, by the way, in our industry. We used to have the bank and the insurance and company like that say, okay, that's That's the cool guy of the valley. They do their crazy stuff. Me, I have a bank account to run. I'm not going to take their stuff. And it's not the case anymore. They are really, really looking. They know that there is great improvement in productivity and that it works and that it scales. And so, yeah, I mean, the adoption of DevOps, I think, is one of the most rapid paradigm shift in our industry that we saw, and it's going to get worse.
That's interesting. Randy, is it going to get worse or better? And especially coming from Commvault, obviously a lot of your customers are very large. Are they buying into that idea that yes, they're ready for this as well?
A lot of them are buying into the cloud, and we're helping a lot of them get there. But the initial question was, is DevOps at its finished point? I mentioned I've been at Commvault since '94. It's funny, I see IBM is one of the gold sponsors here via SoftLayer, and I wonder how many folks out in the audience remember something called Fortran or COBOL or SNA from an IBM mainframe perspective, because that was
Fortran. But go on, please go on.
Because that was the definition of DevOps, and obviously we were very limited in what access we had because very few people or developers had access to that data. I doubt anybody here actually remembers punch cards to create their applications. But take it forward now, a lot more people have a lot more access to data. And the ones that can optimize that and analyze it much more quickly and efficiently are the ones that are going to be the leading class applications. So I don't think we're ever going to stop and get to a finished, perfect nirvana endpoint with DevOps. It's the ones who can take more efficient advantage of the data they have, and that's what Commvault does. We want to make that data much readily available to analytics engines, provide analytics, as well as protecting and archiving it.
How convenient that James happens to be next in line to talk a little bit about analytics and DevOps. I mean, James, with Commvault talking about providing this data and so forth, I know Sostra does a lot of analytics. What's the analytics play for DevOps? I mean, DevOps is very much about culture and people and empathy and working together. There's automation, measurement, sharing. Nothing in there says analytics to me. How does it say analytics to you?
Well, so this is the fascinating thing about this. So, I'm a big proponent that the internet's just a big, complex, adaptive system, and if you look at it from that perspective, there are no nice, clean breaks between A and B. So even when you talk about from commit to production as, okay, that's where DevOps fits in, that's not clean either. And it's not clean from a couple of reasons. One is because the criteria by which you evaluate the quality of the product, the ability for it to perform, whatever it may be actually based on business criteria, less so than technical criteria. It may be based on a seasonal concern, maybe based on a certain type of user or a certain type of device being a primary concern for that release. And so those elements that come into play really mean that this conversation that Dev and Ops are finally slowly but surely beginning to have with each other. And I would argue that, you're seeing a lot of adoption, but to the earlier point, you're seeing adoption a lot at the department level. And what we heard a lot about DevOps this year is that there's a pattern where it starts small, and then a few other groups try it, and then the company begins to think maybe this should be an initiative across the company. And I think the vast majority of companies are still at that start small space. So given that, the feedback mechanisms that DevOps are really good at are being discovered and being explored. And I think a big part of what's going to be happening here, where DevOps is now, where analytics fits in with that, is in the feedback loop side. Are we making the right priority decisions about the next thing to work on? It shouldn't be what the developer wants to do next. It should really be what's going to generate the best outcomes for whatever it is we're trying to do with this system. Let's work on what we can objectively define as the components that will give us the best bang for the buck. And that's where I think analytics fits in, because you're going to have stuff like what we do, performance analytics and user flow analytics, user experience analytics. You're going to have stuff along what Commvault can give you, where you're beginning to tie that back in and correlate that against other core business financial metrics or operational metrics and KPIs that you bring in. And those are the things that will influence the technical direction that these systems should take.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely true. Asaf, I'll ask you, are we getting to the point where, and I use this term in hopefully not a pejorative way, where we need grown-up management for these DevOps tools and analytics that's going to do those sorts of things at a management level? Glenn talked about we need to uplift, get managers involved, get management and get a higher level message. Is that something you're doing? Is that something you're seeing?
I think from my experience and from working with the company and working with a lot of us, we actually see the opposite. I think we actually see that a lot of it is about accountability, and a lot of it is about the importance that the developers have with what they write and the features that they release. And I think one of the things that, and I completely agree, that they want the real-time visibility into everything they do and the impact to the business. It's not about the manager coming and saying, we're doing this, and then I'm going to have my BI team that's going to measure it and do this. The person who's actually writing the code, he cares about what his specific code is working in production and how the customers of this specific company are using his specific code and what's their experience is. So I actually think that it's the opposite. You need fewer managers and more people that care about this to make it a priority and make it more viable in the organization.
Yeah, because a lot of DevOps is very much about empowerment and that systems thinking. James,
I was going to say, just to add real quickly to that, and that kind of goes actually along the lines of what I'm talking about, because it's about the conversation that gets generated, the feedback loops. If a manager is essentially, in a more traditional sense, is essentially somebody that directs traffic a little bit. But that's not a conversation, that's a workflow, right? In this sense, what we're doing is we're breaking these workflows down into little tiny pieces. And what we really want is for the feedback loop mechanisms to be very tight and very fast, which means if your developer knows that space and how the technology applies to that business space, so they know the business and they know the technology and they know how the two work together, they're going to be able to make very, very smart decisions. And the more that you open that conversation between the people that have the P&L responsibility and the developer so that that conversation can go on, the better prioritization of work you're going to have for the developer, because the developer is going to determine that. They're not going to get that told to them. But also on the same side, you're also going to get the business people getting a much better understanding about what their expectations should be from the system with each release and each activity.
Yeah, no, I have an interesting perspective. I mean, I see at DevOps days and events like that, a lot of developers and operations people, that are doing the work and in the trenches coming in, and they're fired up about this. I think in the last 6 to 9 months, if you look at a lot of the, and I hate the term, but DevOps thought leaders, the work that they're doing, it's actually in the management consulting space. They are talking to the C-level and the executive VPs and having those conversations because those people are reading about DevOps in Forbes and Harvard Business Review, and they're getting a kind of a very narrow window into what it is. So they're like, I want that. I want continuous delivery. I want those things. How do I get that? So I kind of see an interesting, they're having conversations. Again, it's sort of a management consulting level. There are people in the trenches that get it and want to do it. And I think there's a section in the middle of managers that are really, and I do a lot of work in this space, they're struggling to understand, they've read the HBR article. They've maybe gone to a DevOps days and they don't get why there's cat photos all over the presentations, right? They don't get the memes. And they're trying to figure out what it means in their organization. And that's where I see a lot of organizations doing, in the middle management layer, doing a lot of great work, but also struggling to figure out what do these things mean specifically in their market and with their technology and their technology stack.
Yeah. Glenn, you were going to add to that.
Well, leadership. So leadership is not management. Right, so I'll give two.
This is very zen. Leadership is not management.
That's right. So I'll give two perspectives. One when I was working at HP and now in G2G3. So in HP, February last year, took on an assignment to create an advanced analytics group across the shared services organisation. One of my architects, a leader. So he had a relentless focus to break down the barriers across the organisation to get a platform in place. Now, he's not a manager, he was a leader. He had the vision, the perseverance, just to make it happen. And it was tricky, so I won't go into all that history. Now, I swing to G2G3, and even today, one of my senior developers got a note. Obviously, they know I'm here at the conference, and we've created a new, well, not me personally, he's created a new breakthrough for us, or a direction. So I see him, he's taking leadership responsibilities. I haven't said, okay, right, I want you to go and do this. We've got a very collaborative environment. I've got, a lot of developers. I've got 3D developers, simulation developers. And, they're actually doing things. I'd love to be in there with them, but they're empowered and they're leading. and they're leading and actually creating change across the team.
And I know we had some really good advice from Jason Bloomberg. You know, Paul talked about DevOps appearing in Forbes. You know, Jason Bloomberg, the keynote speaker yesterday morning, first thing here in this room, talking about those self-organised teams and empowering.
It just reminds me that Netflix always talks about context, not control.
Yeah.
You know, freedom and responsibility, right? It's that ethos, you know, from their culture deck.
Yeah, to go back to analyzing the system and having a good vision, when you want to impact, drastically your company and the way your company works, if you don't have those metrics and if you don't have the vision of what is the impact on the system that you're having when you're changing the code, as a developer, either you're stuck and you don't do it, or either you do it and you have this number and you do it confidently and you know that you're doing the right thing.
So, Randy, you've been trying to jump in for a little while.
Just one thing to think about. Again, Commvault may look at it a little bit differently because a lot of the DevOps guys are coming up with way cool stuff. All right, and you're making a lot of things better for a lot of people. There's no question. That could be consumers, that can be big businesses. But something for a lot of folks in the audience to think about is how much portable those applications are. And I'll give a couple of classic examples that Commvault ran into. We had several dozen mid-sized customers and a couple of enterprise customers using a cloud technology. And we helped them move there. We were using this tiered store. They were using it for disaster recovery, and they were using some DevOps and enhancements on top of it. And we got a call from that vendor one day and said, just want to let you know how are things going. We're going out of business, shutting the lights off and pulling all the plugs in a week. Good luck with that. Whoops. Yeah, so we were in scramble mode for about a week to move these customers, and we're talking hundreds of terabytes worth of data, petabytes in total. And we had to quickly move them into a number of cloud targets. Now, a lot of them went to Azure, a number of them went to AWS, but the company was Nirvanix. So for a lot, I'm sure a couple of folks out there in the audience were Nirvanix customers. So as we're talking about all this way cool stuff, I think one of the questions they want to ask is, hey, what's the portability? Am I locked into a vendor lock? Because the second example I'll give, something I did not expect from our customers over the past couple of years is, by the way, it's great you support a number of cloud technologies because we're going to use both. We're going to use three. And that's not something I don't think anybody could have predicted many years ago. I thought it was going to be one, it was going to be an Azure or an AWS or a Rackspace or a SoftLayer, for example. But now all of a sudden it's like, no, they're actually hedging their bets and using multiple targets and compute engines to improve the efficiencies of their businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. So?
Yeah, and I think the other thing that, and I completely agree with you, I think portability is a critical thing when doing with DevOps in it. And one big change that happened over the past couple of years is the container and the Docker. And I know, like, for example, in our environment, we run everything in Docker, so a developer can run his entire system end-to-end on his laptop. He doesn't need a robust system to deploy to production. He can test everything in it. So first of all, it helps with portability because we can always run it on any operating system, on any cloud infrastructure that we want, and it provides the ability to create that in a way, but it is important to do that.
Yeah, I think that's actually really important. And yeah, the containerization is, it's impossible to have a DevOps conference without mentioning Docker at least 3 times. So one more time, Docker, that's 3. I think I've fulfilled my statutory requirement there. James, talk to me a little bit about what you see there in terms of portability. Docker's a new technology, containerization is not. We've been working a lot with VMs, and that's pretty portable. Do we need to do a lot more with Docker, with containers generally? Do you see other sort of, we see Rocket, a little bit of a fork from Docker. Do you see this becoming a bit of a balkanized kind of technology as well?
Here's what I see. If you look at it from the perspective, I have a theory that I call solution gravity, which says basically each new disruptive technology gets the solution back closer to control of the actual buyer, the end buyer of the need for the solution, right? Gets you higher up, closer to that person. So if you look at developers as kind of the level we've gotten to. So Docker is phenomenal because it takes the focus away from the server level and takes it up to the process level. Hey, as a developer, I know what processes my code should run in or how I should divide that up. This is much easier for me to package. I'll definitely do that. But there's an argument to be made that there's another level of breakdown to be had. So I think containers for 10 years, 12 years will be a very safe bet, absolutely. But if you look at things like Lambda on AWS, the service that is a function, Lambda function-centric service, where you are actually deploying functions instead of even processes, that seems a little sweeter and a little closer to the actual need, right? So if we solve problems around networking and a bunch of other things that are concerns to be had around that, it may very well be that things like unikernels, which is a technology that lets you very much even cut out the need for the OS layer at all, and things like Lambda and function-based deployment systems are things that begin to look very interesting from a developer perspective and making it easier to do that. So I don't think Docker is the be-all, end-all, and I don't think containers the be-all. That's not to say I don't think it's the right technology for now and for probably a good decade as we work out these other things through some of these technologies that are out there like Amazon's Lambda. I think it's a phenomenal move in the right direction, but I think there's more to do.
Yeah. Randy, in terms of the more to do, we've talked a lot about technology, containers and Docker and VMs and a bunch of other stuff. Where do you think there's more to do? People, process, or technology?
Well, people want to do more with less technology. I think that's the general concern here, general optimization. I think it's, again, I'm going to go back to people want to do more things with the data they have. They want to become smarter, they want to become faster, they want to become more efficient. And I think the guys who, analyze the data in various ways are going to help and become market leaders. I believe the folks who provide the content for these analytics, either they're doing some of the analytics themselves or they're providing the analytics, the data to be analyzed, they become leaders in this category because it's going to take, it takes a combination of efficiently moving the data, smartly identifying which data to be analyzed, because all these analytics engines and all these analytics applications are only as smart as the data and the content that they're getting, which is something we sometimes tend to forget.
Garbage in, garbage out, right?
Exactly.
The old story.
Yeah, exactly. And I think another benefit for folks would be, when is their analyzing going to begin? From the day one of that DevOps app, or can that DevOps app look back a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years? I think those kind of, one of the Commvault things I'm very happy we did, and kind of throws out a challenge for some of the other big guys, is we've built a lot, 100% of the software we built from the ground up. So we don't have to rely on any integration from any third party we acquired. And for the folks who have acquired technologies over the years, good luck with that. Because you got a lot of guys here building software from the ground up, and I'm like, how would it been? You left HP. How would you like all that HP stuff? Half of the stuff you took with you and build on top of that, as opposed to building from scratch. I'm sure you're taking advantage of building from scratch with what you're doing. Open. There you go. So.
Absolutely.
Well, I come back to that, the people side. So when you've gone through many different life journeys, what's I find very disappointing at the moment, new people come into a company and they've dropped some of the induction processes. So remember back in the old days, you join a company and you work in different departments and you get business context. A lot of it because of the squeeze and the corporate culture, the money, so on and so forth. You come in, how do you fast onboard into your own department, start working, and you lose the whole systems perspective. So if you are in a position of authority, here, just think about the staff that you onboard and how do you actually give them a sense of purpose. That's one thing I think is very, very important. And the other one is duty of care to your staff and to your people that you work with as well. So there is a lot of discussion of what happens upstream, downstream, so on and so forth. There's enough technology out there to make a difference. But at the end, if you don't have the motivation, if you're not inspired to do things, then you're not just going to get out of bed and think about, right, what am I going to do today? How am I going to make some sort of difference? So, I do, encourage people who are in leadership positions. It doesn't mean that you're a manager. You could be on the shop floor or whatever. Make a difference.
Yeah, no.
Sorry, to comment about the analyzing and getting the picture of what's going on, there is the good story actually of FedEx. When FedEx launched, they wanted package delivery, same-day delivery. This was speed. Speed was their focus. And in the how fast can I make new releases and how fast can I create and push some new code. And at the end, FedEx, they noticed that people, they didn't really care about next day delivery. What they care is to know where their packages were and that they will arrive on time. And to have visibility of the package, the ability to track your packages is the most important thing that FedEx is providing. And I think we are seeing the same thing with the DevOps and the DevOps delivery process. What the people want to see is actually speed. Of course, a great, I mean, it's a 10x, more than 10x, 100x increase in speed. But today what people say, okay, wait, that's moving way too fast. I don't know where it's going and I don't trust the system. So all the analytics and all the vision of the actual DevOps process is actually one of the uneven future coming in the process.
Right. So I mean, you asked, is the frontier sort of like people, process, tools in kind of the DevOps space, right? And I have to agree, it's really about the people, because if you look at a lot of the quote unquote unicorns, they have a very sort of specific and oftentimes very public culture about the way they do those things.
And just for our audience, the meme is that the early adopters, Netflix, Zynga, Yahoo, Twitter, Flickr, these are the unicorns. They're special, they're different. But now we're getting into a lot of horses, enterprises adopting.
Right.
So,
no, and it's funny. I mean, there's lots of. I did a talk about unicorns versus the horses, and it's funny because Jez Humble says that he thinks unicorns are just horses with better PR, which I agree with him on that. But they have a very kind of public culture. They talk about their culture. I kind of hate the word culture because it's a little squishy, but I've said they have a shared aesthetic about how they do their work. And they make sure that when they bring people into that organization, into that system, that they communicate that aesthetic to them, and they make sure that those people are really signed up to live that way. There was a question about, like, how does analytics play into this? And one of the interesting things about that, when you have that conversation, is you can't have the conversation at a management level about we are burning our people out because they're up 4 times a night restarting the JVM because it crashes. You can't have that conversation unless you've instrumented it, right? So when you talk about humane systems, being humane to your operators, that sort of thing, or human factors about people make more mistakes because they're tired, that sort of stuff, you can't have any of those conversations, which at its root are people and cultural conversations, unless you've done some of this other stuff.
Right. And you run the risk, though, of, what John Alspaugh at Etsy, who's the VP of engineering at Etsy now, or CTO, I guess, but he talks about the fact that you can get overwhelmed then. You can measure everything. That's great, except if you show everything, nobody's going to pay attention to any of it because it's going to be impossible to figure out what's going on. And I think one of the really brilliant things that's coming out of this too is the ability to sort of recast the same sets of data in overlapping sets across different functions within the organization, so that operations may take a look at, and we're talking operations. In this case, we're talking about either a data center operator or a platform operator, perhaps somebody who's in charge of making sure the platform itself runs. And then you're talking with the developers who are actually developing the application components. And they may see slightly different things in terms of what they're doing, but it's the same set of data looked at from different ways or slightly overlapping sets of data. But boiled down to what can you actually use to be effective? What can you actually use to actually stay on top of this without having to be spread so thin? And this is the interesting factor.
So there's an interesting statistic. When you think of Netflix, again, a unicorn, and they're all in AWS, what do you think they spend? What is the largest percentage of their cloud spend that they give money to AWS for? If you would answer shipping movies across the internet, you'd be wrong. Right. Their business insight platform is where they spend most of their cloud spend every month. It's the team that does the analytics, and I know that people on the team. It's funny. I've actually asked them, like, I had problems with my streaming last night, and they're like, yeah, we know. And I'm like, it's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Sorry, Asaf, yeah, please jump in.
Yeah, I think it's a great analogy, and if you look, they have a very nice presentation about their business analytics, and they say that Netflix is a log analytics company that also streams video. So
right.
it's
a
a
lot
good
of companies are making that kind of claim lately. They're saying, well, really, we're an analytics company, but we happen to do, whatever it may be.
Yeah. I think it was Jamie Dimon who said we're a technology company with a banking license. Yeah. These sorts of things.
Right.
I mean, that's interesting, James, and I just want to touch on that. Where are the other opportunities for DevOps? We've talked a lot about Dev and Ops. Not surprisingly, it's one of my theses that DevOps doesn't start with Dev and doesn't finish with Ops. It's a little semantic play. Now, James, I know that you're interested in this. We've discussed it as well, and you've got a session today which is about bringing DevOps into other areas. Talk to me a little bit about that. Where else does DevOps, the concepts, the ideas, the motivations of DevOps, where else in the organisation does that play?
Well, I think that it really comes down to, if you're going to tighten the feedback loop overall around a digital business, is where you can see the picture first, right? So if you look at a lot of these quote-unquote unicorns are businesses that are built around digital. They are digital businesses. Their business is software. And so you're seeing more and more of this bleed into the more old school businesses first and quickly as they begin to say, oh yeah, we're a media business, we're primarily online, we better be better at this too, or heck, Facebook could eat our lunch, right? But I think the really cool thing you're starting to see is large-scale businesses in industrial controls and a number of other things beginning to say, the real opportunity here is for us to say, what if we tightened the feedback loops and the development cycles in our product line? What if we were able to actually change the manufacturing, speed it up, so it may not be 100 times a day like we see in software sometimes, but it may be, what if we could do an update to a product once a month? And I think Tesla's a great example of a company that's done that. What if we can tighten the feedback loop up on car development, right? So you buy the hardware is relatively fixed, but you can take it in and get things replaced if we decide that we want to do that. But the software we can update very rapidly, so we can change the behavior of the car and add new features to the car very rapidly. I think tighten up these loops using software. Software is eating the world. That quote is a cliche at this point, but at the same time, it's the most important quote in the last 5 or 10 years. And software is the way that you can begin to just completely collapse cycles of getting feedback from your customers and moving in with the market. And I think that's why you're seeing it across the board. We're seeing it in healthcare, we're seeing it in finance, we're seeing it in manufacturing, and so it's talking about it's everywhere.
So if you look at, and yeah, that's a very astute point about across different markets, but if you look within sort of just one company, I think where you're going to see it spreading more, and I've seen organizations do this, and it's kind of amazing when you bring these people in. You can't do continuous delivery without having your QA team involved. You just can't.
Yeah.
Right. So that's an area that it's going to be really important, especially if you want to do continuous delivery. Security. Here's the other problem, because you move all your stuff to cloud and we're moving faster. You can go from everything's fine and hunky-dory to you've lost millions of dollars because someone took your AWS credentials and is mining Bitcoin on AWS in 24 hours, right? So security actually becomes now an important conversation. We've seen, hack after hack. There are a number of great talks about that. That's a big thing. And then it's kind of odd, but I think you're starting to see product management and the product org get dragged into this DevOps thing because, it's what the people that are doing the work are doing, but also it gets them what they want faster. So I think they're joining the game.
Even the strategy business, they want to see okay, you may improve the platform or you may improve the cloud, but it has a negative impact on my customer and on myself. So for me, the goal of transforming everything to software is to give the actual people that are selling and defining what you are doing and what is your impact as a company to your customer and your user, and to increase it. And so the feedback loop is not between the ops and the dev, is between the business and the DevOps loop.
And Randy, if we're looking at this as a holistic system and it's getting bigger, we're providing good outcomes to more people. Do we get to a problem where the hype overtakes the reality to where it's a floor polish and it's a dessert topping and it's everything in between? Is that a problem we need to be wary of?
I think the businesses, you kind of mentioned, the businesses are actually getting more involved because all of a sudden there's a cost factor. All right, and all of a sudden it's they are going to
return on investment earlier on,
Yeah, is the ROI there? I mean, what's the price, what's the risk reward versus improving the information and analytics from the consumers? What's the risk reward about making a business process inside a business more efficient? Are you saving people? Are you saving time? Can they do much more efficiently with what they have? So that's the reason why you're seeing more businesses and more project management teams get involved, because all of a sudden the C-levels are saying, wait a second, there's a spend here. I'll give two examples. There's a deep, cold archiving storage with an Amazon called Glacier. Works very efficiently as deep cold store. We had a customer that had to bring back about 70 or 80 different laptops worth of data, and they got a surprising, well, wait a second, it was very inexpensive to put that in, but wait a second, it was a little bit more expensive than they thought to get that back. So, two things. One, people are more involved, businesses are involved because of the cost. And I guess the other thing, I can't believe we're up here from representing business, supposed, thought leaders, and we've used the word unicorn about 12 times. I'm still getting over that fact that, I got a question. Are you guys actually marketing the fact and benefiting from using the term unicorn when you're selling your product, or is that just something you put on somebody else?
It goes well with the cat memes. What do you
No,
want?
it started from an interesting study of how some of the web scale.
Oh, no, I'm just curious if it's a market term that you guys are leveraging.
No, it got out of hand. By the way, unicorn is outdated now. It's a decacorn.
Okay. Oh, wow.
I need a 10 unicorn.
I know.
Andy, on that, we have too much talk about DevOps, though.
Say again, sorry?
We're having too much talk about DevOps, really. So if you're thinking from a customer or consumer's perspective, they won't be using our language. So, if you look at it from a business services point of view, they'll be looking at it from a different lens. Right. So, I do think that the DevOps practitioners or the organisation structure is about language and context as well.
That's really important. Sorry, and I'll just go to Asaf. In terms of that sort of uplifting to the business level into different parts of the organisation, is that something you're seeing as well?
Yeah, absolutely. We're seeing it as well. And again, the more you get visibility, the more you have kind of like the hunger of the people to kind of see more and be able to affect the change much quicker. So that's definitely some of the things that we're seeing. And I also want to kind of reiterate the fact that about the people and technology and about the involvement of QA. So setting up like a continuous delivery development is not a simple task. There's still a lot of technology that is missing, and a lot of people cobble together processes and technology from all over the world, but it's not a simple task to do, and there's still a lot of room to do. A lot of people want to get to a continuous delivery. A lot of people do certain steps, but just that specific simple task is not there yet from all the aspects.
Now, we've only got a couple of minutes left, and again, I'm going to ask the audience if there are any questions. We've got nothing coming through on Twitter, but hashtag DevOpsSummit, if anyone wants to tweet that, I'll try and answer those questions. But I just want to get to a couple of questions. I've got somewhat of a Sisyphean task here to try and get responses from everyone on one or two questions. But I want to know, just as we wrap, a little bit of an idea from everyone. I'll start with you again, Asaf. What does DevOps look like in the next 5 years, and what are you doing to help evolve that journey?
I think the way we see DevOps looks like is that the people that do operation and do DevOps today are going to be focusing on developing the infrastructure to do it, and the developer themselves, the one that are writing the code, are going to be more empowered, both from a delivery perspective, from an analyzing perspective, from a monitoring perspective, and from an accountability for an end-to-end feature, and eventually to revenue for the company. I think what we're doing in it is having data more accessible and simple for people to use, and that's kind of our contribution to this.
Excellent. James, same question. What's it look like in 5 years? What are you doing to help your customers and the general marketplace get there?
Yeah, I think the thing I think about is the composability that this enables. So the fact that there's so many tools, they're all API driven, they can be connected together reasonably easily. I mean, it's still hard work, don't get me wrong, but it's way easier than it was 5 years ago. So you look at that from that perspective, I really think what you're going to see is an outsourcing 5 years from now, an outsourcing business for certain aspects of the development and build cycle that begins to happen a lot more often. So what we're doing is we're first of all trying to make sure that mobile testing and cloud testing are fully automatable within the process, but I certainly would not be surprised if these didn't become services downstream where you would just say, hey, all I'm going to do is generate my test from my code base and let it go from there.
Excellent. Randy, same question?
Keep it simple. The folks who do more efficient and more way cool things will be part of this new up-and-coming ecosystem in the business world. And the part Commvault helps is we just want to make that content readily available and easily available to those folks to provide, again, what it tends to looks like it be a new ecosystem here of actually efficiently managing the data once they have the content.
Yep, great. Fred?
Yeah, well, we are in the business of keeping and moving software from place to place, from customer to customer, and from developer to operation. So we're going to continue to do it faster and faster, get the feedback, use it for ourselves, and integrate with everybody here to actually get the data so that the right software arrives to the right place at the right time.
Beautiful. Glenn?
I would like to see the DevOps is the enabler for the innovation engine of a company.
Nice.
And it's not really DevOps. It is the innovation engine. And now we'll talk about the executives. They realise this can be a strategic asset for the organisation. From what I do in our company is what we can do around the human science to actually create a spike, and people can adopt things because they want to do it, not because they have to do it.
So I think in the next 5 years, hopefully the future will become a little more evenly distributed, and the composability around good practices of things that work differently in different organizations, but you still have the great outcomes that we all talk about. I think that platform and foundation will become more well understood. I think over the next 5 years, the conversations around culture and people and some of the squishier things that are harder to have because you can't necessarily buy a tool to have a culture conversation, I think are going to continue to evolve. That's a space I find very interesting myself. So, my presentation was on retrospectives and postmortems. How do you do that in a way that's not blameful and that has better business outcomes? That's an area I find very interesting. So, I think the stuff I'm focused on is the cultural aspect and how to roll that out kind of at scale, because that's harder. That's an anthropological problem, and so it's kind of different than what we've seen in the past.
Yeah, excellent. Hey, look, I've actually run a little bit over time, so I'm not going to take any questions. It's also a little bit difficult in this big room. But again, you can reach out to me and any of the panelists today. What I'd like to do is just back to you, Paul, a quick shout out. How can people reach you? What's your website?
Yeah, so you can reach me if you're on Twitter, J. Paul Reed, the letter J, Paul Reed, 2 E's. I will actually tweet out, there's a book that I wrote that's an O'Reilly report called DevOps in Practice. It's the story of Nordstrom and Texas.gov. They're not the unicorns you think of, but they have a very interesting story that turns out they are unicorns. It's just we don't think of them that way. And I will tweet a link with the DevOpsSummit hashtag, so you can find it on Twitter that way.
Thank you. Glenn, how can we find you? How can we ask you more questions?
Right, come to Edinburgh. If you want to come
Open invitation, everyone. Glenn's place.
Yeah, my house.
Will there be scotch?
I do a good barbecue. No, seriously, open invitation. If you want to do a jam with our team, bring it on. No, contact me, glenn.exton at g2g3.com.
Fred?
jfrog.com. That's the best place to find me, find the company.
Excellent. That's easy. Ready?
Best way to get a Commvault update is I'm actually doing a session next in this room,
Absolutely.
which is convenient.
Right here, so
There
stay
you go.
around for that.
Stick around.
James, how can we reach you if we want more questions?
Twitter, James Urquhart, all one word, and SOSTA.com for updates on what's going on with the SOSTA stuff, and through either Twitter or through what we're doing on the SOSTA blogs and stuff like that, you can keep track of what's going on.
Fantastic. And Asaf, how can we reach you for more questions?
Easiest way is Twitter, Asaf Igal in one word. You can also reach me on the Logs.io website. I have all my contact information, email, Twitter, LinkedIn, everything there. So.
Great, thank you. Well, that's all we have time for today. I'm Andy Mann. You can reach me at AndyMann, ANDIMANN on Twitter. My blog is pleasediscuss.com/AndyMann. Stay around. We've got a great session coming up with Randy from Commvault on cloud-centric data management. That's going to start as soon as we get the chairs off. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you to all our panelists.